Welcome to this seminar session. Here's our agenda. First, some reminders about things coming up. Second, now that we've introduced the idea of discourse communities, we want to flesh out exactly what we mean by the concept. Finally, we're going to look ahead to make sure we know what we're doing next. Before we go any further, the idea of starting each weekly seminar session with check-ins and reminders is a pattern that we'll use throughout the course to help you feel engaged and oriented. Our first item on this list is online readings, which are posted on the course page every week. Your best way of preparing for seminar each week is to do the online reading. And by the way, the easiest way to access it is through the link that's included in the news item you receive every week. Next up, your first blog post is due for most of you by the end of this week, but your instructor will give you specific information. Discussions. These will take place on the discussion board starting next week, and you will always get a reminder in that weekly news item on D2L. What we mean by preparing for responses is to make sure you know that responding to peers is built into the fabric of this course. That means responding both to discussion posts and to blog posts. In next week's seminar, we'll go into more depth and detail about responding to peers. As you know by now, your first major assignment is the discourse community analysis, and this is a reminder to read the instructions for yourself and to listen carefully to what your instructor has said about preparing for it. Finally, you'll be familiar with in-class activities from COM 201, so we're just giving you a heads up that they could happen at any time in a lab or a seminar. Last week we introduced the concept of a discourse community, which is going to be the basis of both the assignment of the same name as well as for the theme of your blog posts. In this session, we're going to flesh out what we mean. According to linguist John Swales, a discourse community is any group of people that shares 6 characteristics. First, they agree on common public goals. That's easy. Your teachers, for instance, share the goal of helping you to learn and to prepare for a career. A group of hockey players has a different set of aims: to score goals, win games, advance in the standings. Second, a discourse community has mechanisms of intercommunication, which is just a fancy way of saying that they have different ways of communicating amongst themselves. A community might use texting, email, or video conferencing. A hockey team might use verbal cues or hand signals in the middle of a play. Third, these mechanisms of intercommunication are used to provide information and feedback. This is just an extension of number 2, because most communication in a community takes place in the context of responding and providing feedback. Number 4 talks about genres of communication, but the main purpose here is to highlight different types of written forms: reports, blog posts, emails, and so on. Number 5 is about the vocabulary that members of a discourse community use amongst themselves. Another word we can use here is jargon, whether you are talking cyclists, police officers, or nurses. Each group has a special vocabulary for insiders that can be difficult for outsiders to understand. Finally, a discourse community has both novices and experts. New people coming into the community are novices, and ideally over time they become experts. A community needs a balance of both to survive over time. Let's look at some recreational examples of discourse communities. Here we have a chart that uses the 6 characteristics to look at a hockey team and a community of online gamers. You can pause the video at this point if you like, to get a sense of how each of the characteristics outlined by John Swales can be seen in either of these very different communities. You might also find this chart helps you to think of a discourse community that you'd like to blog about this term. Let's switch now to a couple of vocational examples. This chart shows how 2 very different occupations, plumbers and police officers, can also be examined as discourse communities. You are also welcome to pause the video here if you choose, so that you can see how each occupation can be understood as a discourse community. And, by the way, this might be helpful to you vis-a-vis your discourse community analysis, because we're asking you to choose a community in the field you are currently working towards. In terms of that assignment, your next steps are first to make that decision about the community that will be your focus. And second, you want to think about an expert from that community who you can interview for your assignment. By the way, an interview doesn't need to be face-to-face. You could do it over the phone, over video using Skype, Zoom, or FaceTime. You could even conduct an interview by email. Third, you should draft 3 to 5 questions that you'll want to ask your interviewee. If you've read the assignment instructions, you are collecting information in order to help a newcomer succeed in that discourse community. Here are some sample questions. You might want to pause the video here to take a screenshot or to write questions down. Your instructor will give you more specific instructions about what you'll be doing with your interview questions. Coming up next, you should be planning to complete your first blog post. You should also be finalizing your topic for your discourse community analysis, choosing your interviewee, and finalizing your interview questions. Good luck!